Hello, I'm Jen Jackson, mother of 11 beautiful children. While my life is filled with wonder and adventure, it can also be laced with confusion and what feels like chaos. Can you relate? My goal is to point out that while motherhood can be hard and unpredictable at times, it can also be marvelous and beautiful. As a mother, you have a superpower that cannot be duplicated. You are the true Captain Marvel. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Episode 4 of Marvelous Motherhood. Today, we'll talk about important conversations to have with our children. The most important conversation to have with your children is one you should have on a regular basis. And it's simply a conversation to let your children know that you love them and are there for them. You want to keep a constant foundation of trust, respect, and love with your children. You want to let them know that they can come to you and talk to you about things that they are worried about, things that they hope for, dreams that they have, concerns that they have, etc. You want to keep an open line of communication with your children as much as possible. Realistically, we know that there are some personalities that just don't want to talk and that like to keep things bottled up. But as much as it is in your own power, Mama, to do so, keep an open line of communication and a consistent conversation revolving around the fact that you love your child and you're there for them. Make sure you have clearly communicated that to your child with your words and with your actions. Make it a daily goal to hug your child at least once a day. Now, for some moms, that comes naturally. They just have a natural love language of physical affection and they just hug and kiss their babies all the time. But for other moms, that's a more difficult task and a very tall order. So if you make it a goal to hug your child at least once a day, you can help facilitate that conversation of love and trust in a physical way. One easy way to implement that simple action of physical touch is to hug your child in the morning. The same way you should teach your child to say good morning when they see someone for the first time that morning, add a hug to it. If you walk past your child's room in the morning on your way to the bathroom and you see that they're awake, take a pause and a detour. Make a beeline for their room. Give them a hug and say good morning. Simple acts of love like that can help to demonstrate the conversation that you're going to have with your child on a regular basis, letting them know that you love them. In my opinion, that is the most important conversation to have with your child because having that line of communication open with your child helps them to be able to grow up knowing that they can talk to you about things that are important to them or that are concerning. Now on to a more difficult conversation. The conversation that people like to call the birds and the bees. This is another very, very important conversation to have with your child or your children. Whether it is your husband or the father of the children having this conversation or you yourself. Whether you're having this conversation with a son or a daughter, it needs to happen. Don't assume that your child is going to learn it eventually. Please do not rely on your child's school to teach them these things. And we certainly don't want our children's peers to be the first ones to introduce this topic to your child. And of course, we don't want television and YouTube or pornography to be the way that your child is introduced to this topic. As the mama, as the parent, even the father, of course, you want to be the first source of this information. Now, many of us well know that especially for young children, the first source of information is the authority in their minds. Wherever they heard it first, that's what they hold up as truth about a certain topic. As children grow and get older and gain more wisdom and discernment, they start to understand that there are different opinions on different matters. But as young children, whoever they heard it from first normally is the one who they see in their eyes as the expert. You want all important information to come from you first, parent. And a conversation about sex is no different. It is recommended, and I have personally done this myself, to have the conversation about sex with your children no later than 6 years old. I know that some of you heard me say that age and you gasped. But yes, 6 years old. Especially in a technologically advanced state that we live in, with devices everywhere, with people all around us. We're so connected. We want to be the first source of information when it comes to sex for our children. Have the conversation straightforward. For children, everything in the world is new, and this conversation is no different. So when you have this conversation with your child, it will only be awkward if you, the parent, make it awkward. Because as far as the child is concerned, you're just the parent giving them more information the way you always do. You taught your child to talk. You taught your child to walk. You taught your child to not touch the stove because it's hot. You taught your child to not open the door for strangers, to not play in the street when cars are coming. You're constantly teaching your child and giving them new information. So talking to them about sex is no different. You're just giving them new and important information for their own safety. Now, you especially want to have this conversation with your children as early as 6 years old. And if you believe your child is more mature and needs to talk sooner, then go for it, because you are the parent and you know your child best. But please don't assume that you need to wait until your daughter gets her first period to have this conversation. Please don't think you need to wait until your son's voice starts cracking to have this conversation. You don't want to wait until puberty to explain puberty. Let them know what's coming and what to expect. For example, with my daughters, they knew about the menstrual cycle before their periods came on. And when it came on, years after they learned about it, they simply came to me and told me that their period came on. And then I showed them again, because I showed them before, but I showed them again in the moment how to use a pad. Simple as that. It's a normal part of life, and it shouldn't be treated as something that's taboo or shameless, or shameful rather. So, back to this conversation with your 6-year-old. Make it a natural conversation. If you are a Christian, there are materials out there you can use to tie biblical truths to this conversation. But, Christian or not, the conversation needs to happen for their own safety. So for a little child like a 6-year-old, you want to explain exactly what's going on. You explain the true name of the body parts, not nicknames, okay? We don't want to call it the PP or the cookie box or your special place. You want to give body parts their full names: penis, vagina, testicles, uterus, ovaries. Get out a pen and a paper if you need to try to draw an image of what it looks like inside. Now, I know for a 6-year-old that might be hard to understand what's going on inside of her body. But as she gets older and learns more, she will recall that conversation, and it won't be strange and unfamiliar. But instead, the dots will connect and it will click in her head. Yes, I remember mommy talking to me about this. Explain how sex works. Yes, the penis is inserted in the vagina after an erection, and then When the man ejaculates, the sperm cells go hunting for the egg cell to produce a baby. You can be as clear as that. And no, it will not cause your 6-year-old to want to go figure out how she can do that thing, or he. Again, it is only awkward if you, the parent, make it awkward. But it's information that they should know. And in this conversation about human anatomy and biology that's happening in real life, you want to make it clear that this is something that should not happen until that man and that woman are married. If this is a value that you have, you want to instill that in them at this young age. You also want to let them know that no one should be touching them in these parts. No one else should be having a conversation about this with them except you, the parent. You want to make that clear. No other child their age, no other teenager a little older than them, and especially no other adult is allowed to have a conversation like this with them at that young age. You want to point out to them that if anyone touches them or asks to see or shows them their private areas, a penis or a vagina, or if anyone talks to them about it, especially another adult, that they need to come and tell you right away. Unfortunately, there are more children exposed to these things, to being sexually harassed, than we know. More than we know. The numbers are already high statistically, but there are other numbers that are not reported. And you just want your child to be protected and prepared. Did you know that most cases of molestation and rape in young children come from their own family members and friends who are close to the family? Most cases of molestation and rape in children come from adults and teenagers who they trust and already know. So you want this conversation to happen early so that in the early stages of the grooming process, your child can say, hey, Bobby from next door was talking to me about penises and I don't think that was appropriate. Or, hey, when I went to visit Mom, my stepdad showed me his penis. Was he supposed to do that? When adults start to molest a child, the most normal process is to start with grooming. And grooming is the process of that adult getting your child to, 1, trust them, but also 2, become desensitized to the sexual things that they have in mind for that child. They'll start talking about body parts and giving them inappropriate nicknames like DICK for a penis, for example, or COCK for a vagina, for example. If you notice that your child is using names for body parts that you haven't taught that child, then it is a very high likelihood that somebody is grooming your child, and you need to find out who taught your child those words. Take it very seriously and have the conversation. Don't wait until your child hits puberty to explain puberty or sex. Don't wait until your child starts to bud to decide, okay, maybe I should let them know that nobody else should be touching them there. You never know who is watching you and your children, and you just want to nip it in the bud as soon as possible. And if someone has the audacity to try to groom your child, you want your child to recognize that as inappropriate and come and tell you right away. You want to give your child the speech that if someone tells you not to tell me something, you tell me anyway. If someone threatens to hurt you or your family, if you tell me anyway. You are safe. They're only telling you that because they're scared. Let your children know in advance so that way, if it does happen, they can remember, Mommy did say if someone tells me that, I should tell her anyway. Or if the person threatens me, they're just scared and don't want to get in trouble, so I can still tell my mom anyway. Be proactive. You don't want to have to be the parent in the state of reaction because something dangerous happens. So have the conversation. So what if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, my child is already 12 or my child is already 16 and they already know about it, I'm sure. I probably shouldn't have this conversation. Have the conversation anyway. If you feel like it's going to be awkward, say a prayer first, get your thoughts together, even write down what you're going to say ahead of time if you have to. And don't make the conversation awkward. Even if, because you waited until they were a teenager to have the conversation because they're already that age now, even if they start to feel awkward, let them know and remind them this is a natural part of life. All adults with children have had sex. Remind them that you have had sex with their father, or if you're the father listening, you have had sex with their mother. That's how they were produced into the world. Don't make light of their uncomfortability, but also try to help them to realize that this is an important conversation they need to have with you, and that you want them to ask you any questions they have, and to come talk to you when they're concerned about anything. And if they're already teenagers, you can just bluntly ask them if they have already had sex. Let them know that they're in a trusted, safe space and can give you an honest answer. And don't react with anger or shock or hostility or shame, but ask them questions about their experience, even how they felt about it, and whether or not they felt it was the right thing to do. But keep the line of communications open. If you are of the faith and you want to teach your children to save sex for marriage, make sure you give them the reasons why. Explain to them that sometimes people have sex outside of marriage and they end up having a baby with that person, and then they break up. And now the baby is being raised in a broken home or by a single parent. Or sometimes the mother and father of this newly conceived baby suddenly hate each other. And now they're raising the baby in this hostile environment. And the baby didn't deserve that. Let them know that sometimes as teenagers, a teenager becomes pregnant and has a really hard time trying to figure out how to balance school and parenthood. That is not impossible. It just makes it more difficult. And it's a difficulty that they don't have to face if they just waited until they married somebody who was mature, financially responsible, spiritually mature as well, etc. Remind them that as young adults, their brains, physically, biologically, have not fully developed yet. And so they will make better choices as they get older. Give them the reasons why and answer their questions. And if your children come back to you days or weeks later to recap or to ask for clarity on something you talked about, stop what you're doing, look them in the eye, and answer the questions truthfully, honestly, peacefully, in a non-awkward but information-giving way. So, as I mentioned before, the most important conversation to have with your children is the one to let them know that you love them and you're there for them always. But the second most important conversation to have with your child, starting as young as age 6, is a conversation about sex and about the changes that their bodies are going to go through. Because that is a natural part of life. And in truth, when your baby is born, they are just slowly growing into a sexually mature being. The Bible gave instructions to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. Of all the other things that human beings can do, we can build, we can cook, we can care for things and animals and people. But be fruitful and multiply was the first command he gave them together. Now, Adam had a command before that to work and till the land. But that be fruitful and multiply he gave to every single living creature that he created. But to humans, he said, fill the earth and subdue it. We're all just growing up to make more children, to raise them and teach them, so they can grow up and make more children and raise and teach them, so they can grow up. And the cycle goes on and on and on. So this is an important conversation to have with them, because this is something that they're going to do. They're going to learn about, and they want to learn about it first from you as the parents. Another important conversation I want to talk to you about is the teachable moments that come. This is not one specific conversation. Teachable moments are what I call in my household life lessons. If there's a difficult thing that happened in our life or an exciting thing that happened, I sit my children down and I say, all right, guys, we're having a life talk, and we talk about it. And I let them ask me any questions they have. So here's an example. If I visited someone and noticed that their husband was not very kind to them, I want to teach my children that they can stick up for themselves, and they don't have to deal with a spouse that's unkind to them. So I might have a life talk with them that same day, usually the same day, maybe the next day, but usually the same day. I'll sit them down and I'll say, hey children, we're having a life talk. I want to talk to you about when you're about to marry someone or you get married to someone. If you get married to someone, you and your spouse are equals. Don't talk to your spouse like they are a child. Yes, there are verses in the Bible that says for wives to love and respect their husbands, but the Bible says to each of them to submit to each other out of the fear of the Lord. Submitting to your husband doesn't mean that he gets to talk to you like a child and boss you around. You are still an adult. You have a conversation, but you respect him. At the same time, my daughters, when you grow up, don't talk to your husband like he's a child. Sometimes when wives become mothers, they have a certain way they want to care for the child, and when the husband doesn't care for the child the same exact way, like change the diaper the same exact way or put the shoes on the same exact way, then the wife puts down her husband and says he's useless. Or if he can't fix something in the house that's broken, she might call him weak. That's disrespectful. That's what the Bible means when it reminds you to respect your husband. Just because he didn't do things your way doesn't mean that he's not smart. Doesn't mean that he's an imbecile. So talk to your spouse with respect, and remember that they are not a child for you to disrespect. They are not your servants or your slaves. That's your husband or your wife. They're on your same level. Show them the same respect and care you want. But then I also include in that life talk, if your spouse is talking to you the wrong way, disrespecting you, calling you names, cursing at you, yelling at you, getting an attitude with you because you didn't do things their way, you take a moment to respond calmly to them and let them know that you don't like being talked to that way and you won't tolerate it. It doesn't mean if you're already married, you're going to divorce them automatically. It just means that you're telling them you're going to walk away from that conversation until they calm down, because you don't deserve to be talked to that way. So therefore, in this life talk, I'm reminding my children in their relationships to have respect for their spouse and command respect from their spouse. That it's a two-way street and it's to be expected. Don't let things like your husband calling you the B word slide. Don't let things like your wife punching you slide. Those things need to be nipped in the bud and talked about clearly. That's an example of a life talk, of a teachable moment. And that's just one kind of extreme example. But whenever something happens and you think to yourself, wow, I wish I knew that before this happened, or I wish I knew that when I was a kid, or I wish I knew that before I got married, whatever it is stuck in your head that you think to yourself, I wish I knew that before ... Tell your children, because they probably will wish that they knew that before ... also. So that's my third example of an important conversation, is to take advantage of all the teachable moments that arise. And it doesn't always have to be about relationships. It can be about things like driving also. Sometimes when I'm driving and something happens and I say to myself, I'm glad I knew that, I make sure I tell my children, hey everyone, when you start driving, if you're making a left turn but the sun's in your face and you can't see, don't just blindly go for it and hope that it'll work out. You could cause an accident and harm yourself or someone else. And then I give them tips on how to handle those situations. Keep sunglasses in your car. Make use of your visor. Go out slowly or just miss the light, the turning signal, until you are comfortable with turning. Whatever the teachable moment is, take advantage of it. Make a point of stopping what you're doing, looking at your children, and having the conversation, no matter how short or long it may be, and then give your children opportunities to ask you questions and follow up. All right? So as a recap, the 3 most important conversations to have with your children are: number 1, remind them that you love them and you're there for them. Number 2, have the conversation about puberty and sex while they are still young, and make sure they know what is appropriate and inappropriate, and that they can come to you if something inappropriate happens, and encourage them to come to you right away. And number 3, the third important conversation is to take advantage of all the teachable moments that will certainly arise in your lives with your children. So, I want you to remember this. One thing I've learned as I've talked with my children is that children are eager to learn new things. As I mentioned before, everything is new to children. Even as they reach preteen and teenage status, everything is still new to them. Relationships, conversations, situations, they're new. And you as the parent, you are their life tour guide. So pay attention to when they have questions and when their faces change and their countenance changes. Help them and guide them through life, because I've learned that children need that and they thrive when they have that. So be their tour guide. Motherhood is marvelous because we get to be a part of enlightening this other human being, or this other group of human beings if you have multiple children. You get to be the one to flip the light switch on and show them the proper way to do things. That's a marvelous state to be in, to be able to be life's tour guide, to be able to be the expert on certain things. So what do you think, my fellow sister in motherhood? Leave a comment or send me an email in the description. And remember to have a marvelous day, Mama. You've got this.